And so that's what I did again. And honestly, I'm happy to follow this.
On May 11th, Roland Garros released its singles wildcard list, and Alex Eala's name was not on it. 4 days later, the same tournament used its own official voice to describe Eala and Victoria Mboko as a pair that embody the future of world tennis.
Listening to the people that are making the tournament for years now, and it worked pretty well so far.
That is why this story refuses to sit inside the neat little word welcome. There is no verified evidence that Amélie Mauresmo staged some private red carpet moment for Eala. The move was more sophisticated than that. Paris did not hand Alex Eala a favor.
It's how this big event is run, so I'm pretty happy and more relaxed also for this year. But let's wait until the end.
Paris positioned her, and what Roland Garros chose to signal by May 15th says far more than any ceremonial smile ever could. And once you see the gap between that wildcard list and that future of world tennis label, the entire Roland Garros strategy around Alex Eala starts to reveal itself.
Crowd also is responding really, really well to what's happening throughout the 3 weeks, actually, of the tournament.
This lands now because Eala had just produced her first third round in a WTA main draw clay event in Rome, then walked off with a message that felt less defeated than announced. Rome heard me this time. Grazie mille. Roland Garros. 2026 will be only her second main draw appearance in Paris, which means the tournament is elevating her at the exact moment her clay resume has finally started answering old doubts. More important, Eala herself has acknowledged that 2026 forced her to stop denying how massive her following had become. And when a player is learning clay in public while the crowds get louder every week, a tournament's editorial choices stop being casual. By the time Roland Garros published that May 15th entry list framing, the conflict was already in motion. The conflict here is not one enemy with one microphone. It is the old tennis instinct to treat a young woman from outside the traditional power map as an interesting side plot, right up until her audience becomes impossible to ignore. And to be fair, Roland Garros has reasons to care about optics. Mauresmo has defended the tournament through criticism over women's night session visibility, arguing logistics and match format rather than worthiness. That frustration from the tournament's side is understandable on a basic operational level, but critics such as Ons Jabeur and Iga Swiatek made the deeper point. If the outcome keeps placing women outside prime visibility, the explanation does not erase the effect. That is what makes Eala's sudden foregrounding so revealing. Roland Garros has spent the last few years adjusting to image problems, empty seat complaints, crowd behavior headlines, women's visibility backlash. Now it has a 20-year-old Filipina star who brings atmosphere, emotional investment, digital traction, and a new kind of audience energy. This is not a scandal story. It is a power shift story. So when people reduce this to Mauresmo welcomed Alex Eala, they miss the real drama. The question is not whether Eala got acknowledged. The question is whether Roland Garros has already decided she is too valuable to frame as ordinary. Start with the cleanest fact. Alex Eala was not on the May 11th singles wildcard list. No charity entry, no protected narrative, no soft-focus storyline about the tournament rescuing a fan favorite. That matters, because it strips away the weakest interpretation immediately. Eala was not positioned as someone begging to be let in. She was treated as a player expected to earn her own place. And then Roland Garros itself turned around and spotlighted her anyway. By May 15th, the official entry list coverage did something tournaments do not do by accident. It branded Eala and Victoria Mboko as a partnership that embody the future of world tennis. Not one to watch, not promising youngsters, the future in the tournament's own language. That is institutional endorsement hiding in plain sight. When a Grand Slam starts selling your image before you have won a main draw match that fortnight, the conversation has moved past politeness. It has entered strategy, and the tournament was not reacting to fantasy. Roland Garros had already published a separate feature on Eala's rise that emphasized capacity crowds and queues wrapping around stadiums hours before her matches. That is not just form. That is foot traffic. That is noise. That is people reorganizing their day because one player is on an outside court. Put yourself in the tournament's shoes. You are trying to create atmosphere, build opening week, and pull fans into the grounds earlier and more often. Who becomes more valuable in that environment? A technically solid player with little emotional wake, or Alex Eala, whose matches turn into events before she is even a seed? That question answers itself. Now place that beside Mauresmo's own 2026 rollout. She emphasized opening week expansion, new fan player activations, and a target of 20,000 spectators per day. Those are not abstract administrative updates, they are declarations about what kind of tournament Roland Garros wants to feel like. Direct comparison sharpens the point. The tournament has spent years getting criticized when the women's product felt underexposed. Now suddenly, one of its brightest pre-Paris editorial pushes centers on a young female player whose core strengths are crowd pull, emotional electricity, and visible momentum. That is not random timing. That is a tournament recognizing an answer when it sees one. Then look at the speed of Eala's clay case. April 22nd, she beat Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova in Madrid, 6-3, 6-3. April 24th, Elise Mertens shut her down, 6-2, 6-1. May 6th, Eala answered in Rome by routing Magdalena Frech 6-0 in the opening set before surviving 6-0, 3-6, 6-4. May 8th, she beat Wang Xinyu 6-4, 6-3. May 10th, she pushed Elena Rybakina before falling 4-6, 3-6. That timeline matters because Paris does not need to invent the argument anymore. Eala just delivered her best clay result yet, and she did it days before Roland Garros elevated her publicly. The tournament can market possibility now without sounding delusional. Rome gave the dream a backbone. Eala herself gave that stretch its emotional signature. After the Rybakina loss, she said, "Yeah, I'm happy with my performance. I think I was able to reach a good level of tennis, and I don't think it was an easy win for her." That is not a player shrinking from the stage. That is a player measuring herself against elite resistance and recognizing that the gap is tightening. This is the point where the fans deserve their credit. The people who packed those outside courts, flooded those clips, and kept insisting Eala was not just another nice prospect were not reading tea leaves. They were reading the sport correctly before the institution found the courage to say it out loud. And then came the outside validation that turned enthusiasm into market reality. Coco Gauff, after facing Eala in Dubai, said, "Also, I'd like to thank Alex for bringing a new demographic to the sport." That sentence is devastating in the best possible way because it comes from a player who understands celebrity, pressure, and fan gravity at the very highest level. Once an active superstar says Eala is changing who shows up, the old hierarchy loses its favorite excuse. This is no longer just national pride speaking to itself. This is the sport admitting the audience has shifted, and that is why the emotional climax hits so hard. Roland Garros calling Eala and Mboko the pair who embody the future of world tennis is not a cute line in an entry list. It is Paris finally speaking the language Eala's rise has already forced everyone else to learn. When that validation comes from Coco Gauff, it carries uncommon weight. This is a two-time Grand Slam champion, one of the sport's defining young stars, and a player who has felt Eala's fan effect from the other side of the net. She does not need to flatter opponents. She gains nothing from exaggeration. So when Gauff says Eala is bringing a new demographic to the sport, that is not empty sportsmanship. That is authority transfer. It tells sponsors, tournaments, broadcasters, and even skeptical tennis traditionalists that Alex Eala's value is not confined to a scoreboard. She changes the emotional temperature of the event itself. And once that truth is spoken by someone with Gauff's stature, Roland Garros calling Eala part of tennis's future feels less like hype and more like overdue recognition. The May 18th seeding cutoff now matters more than a bracket detail. If late withdrawals shift the math and nudge Eala closer to a stronger draw position, the singles story changes immediately. If they do not, the doubles debut with Mboko becomes even more charged because Paris has already attached a future-facing label to that team before the first ball is struck. Then there is the Strasbourg or Rabat uncertainty hanging in the air before Paris. Even that ambiguity feeds the larger point. Every scheduling update around Eala now carries audience interest because she is no longer traveling as background talent. She is traveling as storyline. My prediction is simple and defensible. If Eala translates Rome's level into even one meaningful singles push in Paris, or if the Eala-Mboko partnership clicks early, Roland Garros will not be able to keep her on the editorial edges again. The tournament has already tested the branding. The next step is visibility that matches the branding, and that matters beyond one slam. Women's tennis has been looking for global growth stories that feel organic rather than manufactured. Eala gives the sport a version of that story with genuine crowd evidence behind it. That is what makes the Dubai scar so important to remember. On February 19th, Coco Gauff beat Eala 6-0, 6-2. The kind of scoreline critics love because it lets them act as if promise has been exposed as illusion. Eala's response was not defensive. She posted, "3 weeks of fighting with love and pride has come to an end here in Dubai. What a privilege it is to do what you love, with love." 18 days later, she was back on a major stage at Indian Wells, and the season kept moving toward Rome, toward Paris, toward this exact moment where the institution could no longer pretend her wave was temporary. No singles wildcard, then the future of world tennis label, capacity crowds. Rome heard me this time. And Coco Gauff openly acknowledging that Alex Eala is bringing in a new demographic. Those are not disconnected details. They are the outline of a coronation. The verdict is clear. Mauresmo's move matters because Roland Garros is not manufacturing Alex Eala's relevance. It is surrendering to it. Paris finally sees what her loudest believers saw long before the headline writers did. So here is the real debate. When Roland Garros labels Eala and Mboko, the future before they even begin their campaign is Paris leading tennis into its next era, or simply reacting to a fan force that grew too strong to keep on the margins. If you felt that shift between May 11th and May 15th, you belong in this community. This channel is for the fans who recognized Alex Eala's pull before the institutions gave it a title. Stay here for Strasbourg or Rabat updates, the seeding drama, and that first Paris test with Mboko, because the people inside this circle are not chasing the story late. They are watching it form in real time.